you talked about histamines, and I was kind of waiting till we talked about the microbiome, but why is it that some people, and I think you addressed this a little bit, but there are a lot of people where all of a sudden they eat a carnivore diet. Now they're having histamine reactions. And if they start trying to introduce certain foods, they have a high histamine response. What's going on?
The carnivore diet is actually amazing for histamine disorders. Like if I have an MCAD patient, like a really severe, lots of anaphylaxis, lifelong MCAD person walk in my door, that is where we are going. We are going to carnivore. What I think people are experiencing is a confusion. I actually don't think it's histamine that they're dealing with at all. When someone has been on a restrictive diet, like restrictive meaning they're not eating a variety of foods. Okay. So the body is very efficient, or we could call it lazy efficient. It will stop producing enzymes and things to break down foods that we are not eating. So if someone has been on a carnivore diet for say 6 months or 3 months or 2 years, and they bring in carrots, and let's say they only eat half a carrot and they used to eat carrots every day, they could have a pretty big reaction to that carrot because they're not producing the amylase here in the saliva. And so when people bring things in, I always have them bring it in tiny, tiny amounts for a few days to inform the body to start producing those enzymes and get it ready, right? Let it know you need that kind of stomach acid and all of those kinds of things. So that's one aspect. But another aspect is that people go in not knowing a lot about the microbiome and how it works and the gut lining. And there's now that it's become a buzzword, there's this perception that we know more than we do. But those who really specialize in it will talk about how if you stop eating starch and sugars and things that can feed the overgrowth, you're actually going to regenerate that tissue pretty quickly, in about 30 days for some people. I'm talking about the gut lining and the villi. And when you do that, it's awesome. That's ideal. We want to do that. But it's new sensitive tissue. It's like after a cut, that tissue that you have after a cut, it's very sensitive. It's not worn in. There's no blisters on it yet, right? So or calluses would be a better thing to say. So when you bring in a food that you haven't eaten in a while, like a fibrous food, it can feel very rough against that, and you can have a big reaction, but it's not an actual allergy that you're having. And you just need to wait another couple of weeks or so, let it harden up, or maybe 2 months. It's just not time yet. So I think a lot of what people are confusing as histamine issues are not actually histamine at all.
Yeah. And I interviewed Dr. Sivest, and he kind of had the same thought, is just that if you're not eating a food for a while, your body's not going to know what it is. And also we get used to functioning at such a high rate, where we are burning fuel so cleanly and we feel good all the time. And so when we all of a sudden add a food that's maybe not as ideal in our bodies are going to let us know that it's not happy with it. It doesn't mean that it's always a histamine response, but it's just funny because we have these buzzwords that everyone's like, it's the PUFAs, it's the microbiome, it's, it's this or that. And it's just, how do you know for sure it is, right? It's just...
Yeah, I think a big lesson in illness is to become non-reactive, right? If we can become non-reactive in this illness, then we have won. And so if we have a symptom and we make an assumption, it's the opposite, right? We're in victim mode instead. And I think with the reactions, this is a metaphor that I've had for many years and something that I've really thought about. I grew up with fish tanks, and I had these beautiful tropical fish tanks. And one time in college, I came back, and my friend who was taking care of the fish tanks had let it kind of get out of hand, and the fish were alive, but it was a mess. And so I decided I'll set up a brand new fish tank. And I wasn't a rookie, so I got it to the right pH. I did everything right. I put my fish in the new fish tank, and they all died within 3 days. So we are not always aware of all the inflammation that we are living in, and our body's pre-clean diet could be that dirty fish tank that we are alive in, but we're not really aware of what it's supposed to feel like. And when you go on something that brings the inflammation down and is really nourishing your cells and you're feeling good, and then you bring a bit of toxicity in there, or something that your body's not that happy with, it's going to really tell you, and it's going to tell you loudly, because now you can hear your body, whereas before you couldn't. So I think that can be an aspect as well. But with histamines, I specialized in them for 10 years, right? And really they weren't well known until a couple of years ago. But now I feel that they're too well known, because people are assuming that histamines are bad, that they're causing problems, that they can't eat certain things because they have high histamine, when that's not a histamine intolerant person. And for people that aren't intolerant of histamines are fantastic. They're what's in the smart drugs, right? Like modafinil. When people take modafinil to be smart, the reason it works is because it increases histamine in the brain. Histamine does wonderful things. It's responsible for healing a cell. We can't heal a cell without histamine. So we want histamines. And I think if we look at traditional cultures, we see a lot of very high histamine diets. We also see some very low histamine diets. So we've got the range, but we shouldn't be afraid of histamines in general, unless it's a very genuine problem of ours that we're working on.
So what do people do when they do have, so I know one, if we're introducing, we should go slow, and I completely agree with that. But if people feel that now they're eating, let's say they have some ground beef or they have some salmon and they're having like nasal congestion, all the symptoms they believe is histamines, and they're having rashes and breakouts when they are even reacting to foods that are in the meat-based world, what do you think that may be?
For that, I just go cleaner. I go ribeye, salt, and water for that. Yeah, usually those folks aren't going to do as well with like a lamb or a pork or those kind of things. So we'll usually go ribeye, salt, and water. And then once their histamines are down, then we'll bring in the other animals and fish. Or I'll have them, like some people really only digest ground meat best when they're sick. So I'll have them buy a steak and then we'll grind it. And maybe we'll do something lean again, because the fat issue. So maybe we'll start with filet, not for very long. We don't want to get rabbit illness, but for, a few weeks just to get those histamines down. And then at the same time, we're working really hard on lifestyle things, because a lot of these folks are terrified of food, right? It would be like if 9 times out of 10 you walked out of your door, a bucket of ice fell on your head, you would be afraid to walk out that door. Even if you logically told yourself not to be afraid, your body would be sending off cortisol like crazy, right? And getting prepared. The blood would be in the limbs. So a lot of it is re-educating the brain via the limbic system to not be responsive, to feel safe, to not release cortisol, getting cortisol levels down, whether it's through eating at regular times and meditating and waking and going to sleep at the same time, never taking hot showers. There's so many ways to get at histamines outside of diets. And then within the diet, we'll get it down. And then we'll bring in the probiotics later that downregulate histamines. There's actually wonderful probiotics that do that, specifically L-Sakai, which is found in Korean kimchi. I mean, it's one of the best that downregulates histamines. Yeah, and you would think kimchi is a high histamine food, but actually both kimchi and kefir, both of those have wonderful antihistamine probiotics. So if you can get that person's histamines down low enough where they can tolerate those foods, they can start building up that microbiome that's going to handle histamines just